the final and supreme revelation of Vivekachudamani. This is the ultimate and supreme part of Vivekachudamani, where there is no imagination, no philosophical interpretation, no complex reasoning, only the ever-revealing truth. A truth that cannot be spoken by words, cannot be confined within scriptures, and cannot be concealed by doctrines or arguments. This is not just a discourse, it is a shower of divine nectar, a shower that can dissolve every doubt within you, wash away every suffering, and transform every darkness into light. This is the same immortal nectar for which the sages surrendered everything. This is the divine realization that awakened the tongue of Adi Shankaracharya to proclaim the vast ocean of Advait. This is the final point when nothing remains but absolute silence, because here, the knower, the act of knowing, and the known merge into one. Whoever watches this video will not remain just a listener, they will witness themselves as their own true self. There is no story here, no mere sermon. This is the unveiling of truth itself. This is not just a simple video, it is the vast ocean of Vivekachudamani itself. Now, whether you choose to dive into it or stay at the shore, that decision is yours. So come, awaken the silence within, listen to the voice of your own soul, and enter into the ultimate truth. The root cause of bondage in this world is that a person entangles their mind in worldly thoughts and desires. Desires are endless. The more they are fulfilled, the more they grow. Desires never cease. As soon as one desire is fulfilled, another is born. This is an unending cycle, a trap from which one cannot be freed unless the root of desire itself is eliminated. Desires bind the soul to this world. As long as there is attachment to worldly objects, bondage will persist. But when the desire to see the Brahm becomes stronger than worldly cravings, then material desires naturally fade away. Just as darkness is not removed by force, but simply by lighting a lamp, in the same way, when Brahmajanana, knowledge of the Supreme, arises, the darkness of desires disappears on its own. Just as a dream vanishes upon waking up, in the same way, when self-realization dawns, one is liberated from the bonds of this world and the afterlife. This realization brings true freedom and eternal peace. The end of desires and actions is the true liberation. Excessive indulgence in material pleasures clouds the intellect. Worldly attractions pull a person away from their true self. Once a person falls from their real nature, their decline continues endlessly. Just like a bad habit that is easy to acquire but difficult to let go. Overindulgence in sensual pleasures makes the soul forget its true essence. The Vedas declare that one who sees duality instead of oneness will always live in fear. For example, if a small drop of water sees itself as separate from the ocean, it will feel afraid. But once it realizes that it is nothing but a part of the vast ocean, it becomes free. Similarly, when we mistake the body for the self, we become trapped in suffering. The body is temporary. It is born and eventually perishes. But the soul is eternal, unborn, and immortal. The search for truth is an inner journey. It is the path of self-inquiry. A person who chases temporary, material things will always experience suffering, just like a deer that runs after a mirage, believing it to be real water, only to be deceived in the end. In the same way, those who pursue worldly pleasures eventually realize that they have been deceived. This is why the sages taught us. Renounce the unreal. Attain self-knowledge. Realize that I am Brahma. This realization opens the door to liberation. When one truly experiences this ultimate truth, all worldly sorrows disappear, and the soul experiences pure bliss. Desires arise from external objects, and the more one thinks about external pleasures, the more desires increase. But just as a still lake reflects the moon clearly, only a calm and pure mind can reflect the self. A wise person never accepts the unreal, because they know that what is false will eventually perish. The path of self-knowledge is not easy, but it is the only true path. As long as a person keeps their mind entangled in external pleasures, they cannot perceive the eternal truth of the self. It is like someone who sees the reflection of the moon in water and mistakes it for the real moon, forgetting that the true moon is shining above. Worldly pleasures are temporary. They come and go. But Vedanta teaches us that self-realization is only possible through meditation and inner reflection. Just as a lens can focus the sun's rays and ignite fire, in the same way, when the mind is focused inward on the self, the fire of wisdom is ignited. But for this, one must discipline the mind and senses. The ego is extremely subtle, so subtle that it is difficult to even recognize. Thus, only through self-inquiry, deep meditation, and the grace of the Guru can one break free from the illusion of the ego and merge into the ultimate reality, the Supreme Brahma. Even great seekers may still carry desires accumulated over many lifetimes. Just as even a small twig floating on water can create ripples, even the slightest trace of ego can become a cause of bondage. Ego is composed of two forces, the veiling power and the projecting power. The veiling power conceals the truth, while the projecting power binds a person to the illusion of ego, making them engrossed in worldly pleasures. It is like the shadow that falls on the moon during an eclipse, preventing its light from reaching us. As long as this veiling power exists, one cannot recognize their ego. For this reason, until one attains self-realization, they remain trapped in the attractions of the world. However, just as darkness disappears with the light of the sun, ego dissolves when the soul is awakened. When one experiences the Supreme, all worldly desires and ego vanish. The bliss of the soul is so deep and complete that all bonds of the material and spiritual worlds dissolve automatically. Until a person recognizes their true self, they continue to suffer in the illusion of the world. Only through the direct experience of the soul does this illusion dissipate, and one realizes that the suffering surrounding them was merely a result of ignorance. It is like a person experiencing a terrifying dream, only to wake up and realize that it was just an illusion. With self-realization, one understands that the bondage of the world is also an illusion. The intellect creates this dualistic world. Just as a piece of iron, when heated in fire, can take on different shapes, the intellect, when connected to the soul, manifests the world in various forms. This world is nothing but a play of illusion, not the ultimate reality. When a person sees themselves suffering in a dream, that suffering is not real, and upon waking, they realize it was just a mental illusion. Similarly, one who fails to distinguish between truth and falsehood remains trapped in delusion. The soul is beyond truth and untruth. It can only be known through inner experience. When one recognizes the truth through wisdom, they are freed from illusion and attain supreme peace. Just as an observer of gold jewelry may focus only on its shape and fail to recognize the gold itself, when we see only the body, mind, and ego, we fail to see the true nature of the soul. But one who realizes the soul understands that the body and ego are merely external forms. What is truly eternal is the soul. The body, mind, and ego are constantly changing. What changes is false. The soul never changes. It remains the same forever. That is why it is the only truth. When a child grows into a young adult and then ages, the body changes, but the I remains the same. When we dream and then wake up, thoughts change, but the I remains the same. When ego fluctuates between pride and humility, even then, the I remains the same. What does this mean? It means that the body, mind, and ego are impermanent and therefore false, while the soul is unchanging and eternal, making it the only truth. As long as the mind is entangled in duality, it cannot be at peace. It constantly seeks differences. Who am I? Who are you? What is this world? But when a seeker accepts the truth as it is, all conflicts of the mind dissolve. Have you ever observed water? When it turns into ice, it appears solid. When it turns into steam, it seems to have disappeared. When it flows as a river, we perceive it as a current. When it merges into the ocean, we sense its depth. But does its essence change? No, the essence remains water. Similarly, as long as we remain entangled in the ideas of I and you, we cannot perceive the truth. But as soon as we realize that the soul, God, and the entire existence are merely extensions of the same truth, all illusions disappear. Meditation deepens naturally. What is the experience of a yogi absorbed in samadhi? What kind of life does he live? Nirvikalpa samadhi is the state where no choices, no thoughts, and no imagination remain. Only the pure experience of the self exists. A true yogi is one who has calmed his mind, mastered his senses, transcended worldly pleasures, and abandoned ego and resentment, embracing forgiveness. When these qualities are cultivated within, meditation deepens, and samadhi becomes possible. When a yogi dives deep into meditation, he experiences his own soul directly, the consciousness that neither changes nor perishes, that neither wavers in joy nor is disturbed by sorrow. This realization frees him from the darkness of ignorance. All rising thoughts in the mind, the illusions of the world, the distinctions between joy and sorrow, the separation of I and you, all dissolve. The realization of the non-dual self occurs. Just as a river loses its individual identity when it merges into the ocean and becomes the ocean itself, in the same way, a yogi established in samadhi dissolves into Brahma. There remains no choice, no impurity, no distinction, only the blissful consciousness remains. Can mere study and practice of scriptures lead to self-realization? Those who only discuss Brahma but do not experience it are like someone who reads about food but never eats. Can such a person satisfy their hunger? No. True liberation requires mastering the senses, mind, and ego. When all of these are absorbed, meditation deepens. But why does meditation vary? Why is one unable to remain steady in it? The reason lies in the play of the gunas. A person is bound by various qualities: attachment, aversion, delusion, and ego. These create the illusion of duality in the soul. There are three impurities in the mind: sattva, which brings peace but also attachment; rajas, which makes one active but also restless; tamas, which causes inertia and increases ignorance. When these three dissolve, the soul is established in its pure, indivisible nature. Have you ever seen the reflection of the sun in different pots of water? It appears as if there are many suns, but when the water disappears, only one sun remains. This is the truth of the soul. When the waters of the mind and senses become still, the soul alone remains indivisible. A person becomes whatever they completely focus their mind upon. But this is only possible through continuous meditation. Just as iron placed in fire becomes hot like fire itself, when one meditates on the divine, they attain that same divinity. Meditation is not a practice of a single day. It is a lifelong discipline. Just as a child gradually learns to read through practice, just as a seed grows into a tree with regular watering, just as a river continuously flows and removes all obstacles in its path, similarly, through the constant practice of meditation, the mind discards all impurities and attains nirvikalpa samadhi, the pure, indivisible, and unchanging state. Can one be liberated from karma? Can the bondage of actions accumulated over a lifetime be broken? When the mind is established in nirvikalpa samadhi, all the roots of desire are destroyed. And when desires are destroyed, karma also ceases. Just as cutting the roots of a tree causes the tree to fall automatically, in the same way, when all desires in the mind are eliminated through meditation, karma dissolves as well. Then, the boundless energy of the soul flows freely, effortlessly, and uninterruptedly within and beyond. When the soul realizes its own completeness, there remains no need to attain anything. And when there is no need to attain anything, no new karma is formed. This is the secret of liberation. But is mere listening to the Vedas enough for liberation? Hearing, Rava, is necessary. But even more important is contemplation, Manna. More than contemplation, what matters is firmly assimilating self-knowledge. But infinitely more important than all of these is Nirvikalpa Samadhi, emerged from the same consciousness. When the mind is stabilized in the soul, this knowledge manifests. Beyond the body, mind, senses, and ego, when the soul is experienced as all-pervading and indivisible, the bondage of the world dissolves on its own. Just as waves, whirlpools, and bubbles in the ocean are all forms of water, so too is this entire universe an expansion of Brahma. When one realizes this truth, all distinctions disappear. Just as ice, steam, and water appear different but are essentially the same, so too are the body, mind, and soul not separate. Maya is the power that casts a veil of illusion over the truth. Just as pots and statues made of clay appear distinct but are essentially clay, so too does Maya create the illusion of multiplicity where only one reality exists. When the vision is awakened, the illusion of Maya vanishes on its own. Advat means the existence of only one ultimate reality. When duality, the perception of separation, ends, concepts of right and wrong become meaningless. Vedanta teaches that all contradictions seen in the world exist only because of Maya. A river may appear to flow in different streams, but ultimately it merges into the ocean. Likewise, all apparent distinctions ultimately dissolve into Advat. When the mind is clouded by ignorance, it perceives duality as real. But when the light of wisdom shines, it becomes clear that everything is merely an expansion of the one ultimate truth. If someone discriminates based on religion, caste, or social class, he remains in duality. But the one who sees all as emerging from the same consciousness is established in Advat. Brahm is not an external entity that can be known through books or the senses. It is pure, infinite, and unchanging, like the sky. It pervades both within and without, but it can only be known through self-realization. Until one directly experiences this truth, he remains entangled in words and concepts. Brahm is a subject of experience, not of logic or imagination. Just as a blind man cannot fully understand the sun simply by hearing about it, so too does Brahm remain, just a concept until self-realization occurs. There is no distinction between the soul and Brahm, just as there is no separation between the ocean and its waves. The Vedas repeatedly declare that Brahm is one and without a second, nothing else exists apart from it. The world appears real as long as one is in ignorance. Just as a person may dream of being a king, but realizes upon waking that it was merely a dream, so too does the truth become evident upon self-realization. This entire universe is nothing but an expansion of Brahma. To consider the body as one's true self is the greatest illusion. This body is composed of the 5 great elements: earth, water, fire, air, and space, and eventually merges back into them. But the soul is beyond all this. It is pure, immovable, and infinite. Still water accumulates dirt, but flowing water remains fresh. Similarly, a person bound by desires remains stagnant in life, whereas one who renounces is always free and blissful. Attachment and ego hinder spiritual progress. Attachment means excessive fondness for worldly things, and ego means considering oneself superior to all. Until these 2 obstacles are removed, liberation is not possible. The one who renounces is truly free. Renunciation lightens the mind. A light mind becomes steady in meditation, and only a steady mind attains supreme bliss. Renunciation is not a hindrance, but the gateway to liberation. When everything is given up, everything is attained. Meditation is not merely an act of sitting. It is a method of establishing a deep connection with the soul. 3 things are essential for proper meditation. Focus the mind solely on Brahma, allowing no other thought to enter. Withdraw the senses from their objects, ears from noise, eyes from sight, skin from touch. Do not worry about the body's posture. Concentrate on the realization of the mind and soul, not on bodily sensations. When these three elements are firmly established in meditation, the mind becomes pure and merges with Brahma. The nectar of self-realization gradually begins to flow, and one experiences infinite peace. Just as the still waters of a river reflect everything clearly, so too does the mind, when completely still through meditation, clearly reveal the reflection of Brahma. The root cause of our sorrows and troubles is that we consider ourselves to be the body and mind, whereas our true identity is the soul. When we forget that we are the pure soul, worldly suffering affects us. To free ourselves from these bondages, we must detach from the body and mind and focus solely on the soul. Brahma alone is the truth. Everything else is temporary and perishable. When one realizes that his true nature is the soul, all suffering automatically disappears. This awareness can be deeply experienced through meditation. Self-realization is not a one-time event, but a continuous practice. It is not an external achievement, but the natural state of the soul that needs to be experienced. Constant practice is essential for self-realization. Coal appears black from the outside, but when it burns, it radiates light. Similarly, the soul is luminous within. One just needs to develop the ability to see it through meditation and spiritual practice. Meditation is not merely focusing on an object, but rather seeking one's true nature. When the seeker abandons all dualistic notions of this and that and becomes established in oneness, he attains self-realization. The true goal of meditation is to abandon all fragmented perceptions and remain fixed in Brahma alone. This unity should not remain just a thought, but must be experienced directly. Do not consider meditation as an action. Instead, see it as a journey to discover your true self. When a yogi is fully immersed in this oneness, he no longer perceives distinctions. He sees only Brahma. This world is a play of Maya. It appears real, but is, in truth, an illusion. Like a mirage that seems to show water from a distance, but does not exist in reality, so too is this world merely a projection of the mind. As long as one considers it real, he remains bound by it. But when he starts seeing it as a dream, he becomes free from its grip. The soul is pure consciousness, ever present as the witness. It exists beyond the body, mind, and intellect. When one recognizes the pure nature of the soul, he perceives nothing but Brahma. Just as countless waves rise and dissolve in the ocean, but the water remains the same, so too does this world manifest in various forms and then disappear, while the soul remains unchanged. One does not need to abandon the world, but rather see it with the right perspective. Know that you are not the body or the mind, but pure consciousness. Just as an actor plays different roles on stage, but remains the same person within, so too do you play various roles in this world. But in reality, you are only the soul. When one recognizes the pure nature of the soul, all conflicts vanish. Pleasure and pain become equal to him, for he understands that they are merely the mind's play, while the only reality is Brahma. The world is neither entirely real nor entirely false. It is simply a passing illusion. This world is like a dream. While it is being experienced, it appears real. But the one who sees it as merely a dream becomes free forever. Ignorance has no independent existence. It appears only in the absence of self-knowledge. In deep sleep, a person is unaware of friends and enemies, happiness and sorrow. He perceives no distinctions. In deep sleep, one unknowingly experiences non-duality. But in self-realization, this experience happens with complete awareness. When a person wakes up from deep sleep, he again falls into the bondage of Maya. Seeing this world as a dream does not mean rejecting it. It means not getting trapped in it by considering it real. Just as a wakeful person is unaffected by the events of a dream, a wise person is undisturbed by the turbulence of the world. To experience Brahma, one does not need to renounce the world, but must renounce the restless mind. It is the mind's fickleness that keeps you away from the truth. When the mind becomes still, the world itself appears insignificant, and only the experience of Brahm remains. This is self-realization, this is liberation, and this is the ultimate truth. The soul cannot be seen with the eyes, but only experienced. Just as the wind is invisible, but its presence is felt through touch, so too is the soul known through direct experience. Self-knowledge is attained through practice, detachment, and devotion. Even while living in the world, self-knowledge is possible. Just as a lotus flower remains untouched by the mud in which it grows, a person can attain self-realization while still living in the world. Success in meditation comes with continuous practice. Just as a wave, by repeatedly striking the shore, erodes even the hardest rock, so too does persistent meditation stabilize and deepen the mind. The result of knowledge is movement toward truth, while the result of ignorance is entanglement in falsehood. Just as after waking from a dream, one no longer desires the things seen in the dream, so too does a self-realized person live in the world without attachment. The highest form of renunciation is the complete cessation of desire for pleasurable objects. Simply giving up clothes or a house is not true renunciation. True renunciation is the eradication of craving from the mind. True understanding means the complete dissolution of ego. Mere scriptural knowledge is not enough. As long as ego remains, true understanding does not arise. Self-knowledge is complete only when all past worldly desires are entirely destroyed and never arise again. Just as burnt seeds never sprout, the mind of a self-realized person is free from worldly desires. A wise person lives in the world, but is not affected by it because he has realized the truth. For him, this world is just a passing dream. He is undisturbed by fate and remains equanimous in pleasure and pain. The one whose mind is always absorbed in Brahm, who remains detached from worldly matters, and who sees this world as a dream is truly enlightened. A knower of Brahm lives in the world but is never entangled in it. In the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna described the qualities of a sthitaprajna, one with steady wisdom, to Arjuna, one who remains undisturbed in all situations. True knowledge is that which leads to the experience of oneness between the soul and Brahm. The one who is fully established in this truth is called Jivanmukta, liberated while still living. A Jivanmukta is free even while living in the body. He is not affected by the external world and is not bound by anything. In him, there is no sense of I or mine. The body continues according to destiny, just as a shadow follows the body, but the Jivanmukta remains unaffected by it. Just as sunlight has no specific shape of its own, the ego of a liberated being is completely dissolved. He exists solely in the radiance of Brahm. A true sage may appear outwardly ordinary or even unaware, but within, he is filled with complete knowledge and bliss. Just as a simple clay lamp may look ordinary on the outside, but is filled with light inside, a self-realized person may appear normal externally, but is inwardly immersed in divinity. True liberation lies in being free from ego. The one who lets go of worries about the past and future, who remains detached even while living in the world, is truly established in Brahm. Just as a person lost in sweet music becomes so absorbed that he hears nothing else, so too does a liberated being become so immersed in supreme bliss that he loses awareness of the external world and even his own body. He lives in the world but is not entangled in it. Just as a lotus flower remains untouched despite growing in the mud, similarly, a wise person lives in the world but is not attached to it. He uses the body but does not hold any ego or attachment toward it. Just as an actor plays a role on stage while knowing deep within that it is just an act, in the same way, a liberated being exists in the world but remains beyond it. A liberated person does not abandon his duties. Rather, he performs his actions without attachment. Just as the wind moves the clouds but does not depend on them, similarly, the wise one performs his duties but does not get bound by them. When one realizes the truth of the Vedas and recognizes one's true nature, one experiences the purity and divinity of the soul. Just as a wave is never separate from the ocean, a liberated being does not consider himself separate from Brahm. His mind remains ever calm and steady because he has realized that the soul is eternal and complete. Nothing in this world can disturb his peace because his mind is established in the bliss of Brahm. He sees no difference between the soul, God, and the universe, for he knows that all are manifestations of the same Brahm. Just as a knowledgeable jeweler does not see gold ornaments as different, but perceives only gold in all. Similarly, a liberated person sees only Brahm in everything. There is no discrimination in his vision. He knows that just as different waves arise from the same ocean, the entire creation is an expansion of the same Brahm. Therefore, he remains unaffected by respect or disrespect. He neither rejoices in praise nor grieves over criticism. Just as strong winds cannot move a mountain, in the same way, a liberated being remains unaffected by the opinions of others. The fading of trust in the world is a sign of Brahm realization. One who has truly experienced Brahm loses all interest in the world. Just as a child outgrows interest in toys as he matures, a wise person does not get entangled in the play of the world. If someone claims to have realized Brahm, yet remains engrossed in worldly matters, then understand that his knowledge is merely intellectual and not experiential. When one gets the taste of the highest truth, one loses interest in lower pleasures. Just as someone who has tasted nectar has no interest in ordinary water, one who has experienced the bliss of Brahm naturally loses all worldly desires. Just as an extremely lustful person still does not harbor any wrong thoughts upon seeing his mother, similarly, one who has realized Brahm becomes completely free from cravings. In the light of Brahm realization, all worldly attractions vanish completely. A liberated being sees no difference between the soul, God, and the world. Even after attaining self-realization, one does not escape the results of past actions. Just as an arrow, once released, inevitably reaches its target. In the same way, past actions yield their results. However, a self-realized being remains unaffected by them. He remains as a mere witness, just as the sky observes the changing seasons, but is not affected by them. He knows that the soul is always the same. It does not change by fate nor by the results of actions. But, O Guru, ordinary people are attracted to worldly pleasures and spend their entire lives trying to attain them. How does a self-realized being become free from them? An ordinary person is drawn toward worldly pleasures due to desires, attachments, and ego. He believes that wealth, status, relationships, and luxuries are the sources of real happiness. But a self-realized being understands that all these are mere illusions of the mind. He realizes that the pleasures derived from the senses and the mind are temporary and will inevitably end. Therefore, he does not seek happiness in things that are perishable. So, O Guru, does a self-realized being have no desires for worldly things at all? Indeed, for him, the world appears like a dream. Just as a person who wakes up does not consider the objects of his dream to be real, a self-realized being sees this world as an illusion. He knows that what belongs to him today will belong to someone else tomorrow. One who is honored today may be dishonored tomorrow. That is why he neither rejoices excessively over gain nor grieves over loss. O Guru, then do actions become an obstacle for a Brahmana? No, because he does not claim ownership of his actions. Just as clouds moving across the sky do not affect the sky, similarly, the actions of a self-realized being do not bind him. He simply flows with life without attachment or pride. He knows that actions take place only at the level of the body and mind, and they have no effect on the soul. But, Gurudev, if Brahm is the only truth, then why does this world appear to be real? It is only due to ignorance. Just as a person in a dream perceives the objects in the dream as real, but, upon waking, realizes that they were merely creations of the mind. Similarly, an ignorant person considers this world to be real. But when self-realization occurs, one understands that the world is merely the play of Maya, and only Brahm is the ultimate truth. Gurudev, does Maya have an independent existence? No, Maya has no real or independent existence. It is merely the power of Brahm that creates the illusion of duality due to ignorance. Just as mist can be seen in the sunlight, but when the sun shines brighter, the mist disappears. In the same way, in the light of self-realization, Maya ceases to exist. Gurudev, you said that the Guru and the scriptures show the path, but self-realization must be experienced personally. If the soul is already free, then why does knowledge remain incomplete without experience? My child, the difference between knowledge and experience is the same as that between words and their meaning. Merely knowing the words is not enough. Until there is experience, the truth remains just a concept. Imagine someone who has never tasted honey but has read and heard a lot about it. Does he truly know what honey tastes like? Until he personally tastes it, his knowledge remains incomplete. Similarly, merely reading or hearing about the soul is useful, but without direct experience, it remains theoretical. Gurudev, if the light of the soul is ever present, then how does ignorance arise? Is it also born from Brahm? No, my child. Brahm is not the cause of ignorance. Ignorance is merely an illusion, not reality. Imagine a rope lying in the dark, and someone mistakes it for a snake. He becomes fearful, runs away, and believes the snake might bite him. But when the light appears, he sees that it was only a rope, and there was never a snake. Similarly, the soul is always free, but due to ignorance, the being considers itself to be the body and gets entangled in worldly bondage. When the light of self-realization appears, one realizes that they were never truly bound, they were always free. Gurudev, then what is the way to be free from ignorance? The only way to be free from ignorance is through self-inquiry and meditation. Discernment, Viveka, the ability to distinguish between the real and the unreal. Just as a person moves from darkness to light, a seeker must abandon falsehood and move toward the truth, realizing, I am not the body, I am the soul. Detachment, Vairagya, freedom from worldly desires. As long as the mind seeks happiness in worldly objects, ignorance will persist. Just as a bird cannot fly until it lets go of the branch, in the same way, liberation is not possible until the mind detaches from the world. Meditation and self-reflection, a seeker must experience the soul within. Just as a mirror must be cleansed of dust to clearly reflect an image, when the mind is purified, the knowledge of the self naturally reveals itself. Company of the wise, satsang, being in the presence of a guru. Just as sitting near a fire warms the body, staying the company of enlightened beings ignites the inner light. It is through the guidance of a guru that the bonds of ignorance are broken. Gurudev, does a person still perform actions after attaining self-realization? My child, a self-realized person is not bound by any actions. He sees that all worldly activities operate according to the laws of nature, while he himself remains a mere witness. However, he is not entangled in them. He is neither affected by pleasure nor disturbed by sorrow. Some enlightened beings stay in the world and work for the welfare of others, like King Janka, who ruled his kingdom and upheld righteousness even after attaining self-realization. Renunciation is not about changing external appearances, but about transforming the mind. If a person remains detached even while living in the world, he is truly free. But if one takes formal renunciation yet remains mentally attached to the world, he is not truly liberated. Gurudev, how can one practice staying established in the self while living in the world? To practice self-realization while living in the world, three main methods can be followed. Remembrance and contemplation, continuously reflecting on the nature of the self, understanding, I am not the body, I am pure consciousness. Just as the reflection of the sun in water is unaffected by the movement of the water, the soul remains untouched by worldly joys and sorrows. Equanimity, samta, remaining balanced in happiness and sorrow. For a self-realized person, there is neither friend nor enemy. He sees all with equal vision. Because he knows that actions occur only at the level of the body and mind, and they have no effect on the soul. But Gurudev, if Brahm is the only truth, then why does this world seem real? Is it only due to ignorance? Just as a person in a dream considers the objects he sees to be real, but upon waking realizes that it was all a mere creation of the mind, similarly, an ignorant person considers this world to be real. However, when he attains self-knowledge, he understands that the world is merely an illusion and that only Brahm is the ultimate reality. Gurudev, does Maya have any independent existence? No, Maya has no real or independent existence. It is merely the power of Brahm, which creates the illusion of diversity due to ignorance. Just as mist can be seen in the light of the sun, but when the sun shines brighter, the mist disappears. Similarly, in the light of self-knowledge, Maya ceases to exist. Gurudev, you have said that the Guru and the scriptures show the way, but the experience of self-realization must be attained by oneself. If the soul is already free, then why does knowledge remain incomplete without experience? My child, the difference between knowledge and experience is the same as that between words and their meaning. Merely knowing the words is not enough. Until there is experience, truth remains just a concept. Imagine someone who has never tasted honey but has read and heard a lot about it. Can he truly know what honey tastes like? Until he tastes it himself, his knowledge remains incomplete. Similarly, merely reading and hearing about the soul is useful, but without direct experience, it is incomplete. Gurudev, if the light of the soul is always present, then how does ignorance arise? Is it also born from Brahm? No, my child. Brahm is not the cause of ignorance. Ignorance is merely an illusion. It has no real existence. Imagine a rope lying on the ground, and in the darkness, someone mistakes it for a snake. He becomes frightened, runs away, and believes the snake will bite him. But when light appears, he realizes that it was only a rope, and there was never a snake. Similarly, the soul is always free, but due to ignorance, the individual identifies himself with the body and gets entangled in the bondage of the world. When the light of self-knowledge shines, he sees that he was never bound, he was always free. Gurudev, what is the way to be free from ignorance? The only way to be free from ignorance is through self-inquiry and meditation. First, discernment, viveka, the ability to distinguish between truth and falsehood. Just as a person moves from darkness to light, a seeker must abandon untruth and move toward truth. He must realize that he is not the body but the soul. Second, renunciation, vairagya, freedom from worldly desires. As long as the mind seeks pleasure in worldly objects, ignorance will remain. Just as a bird cannot fly while clinging to a branch, one cannot attain liberation while being attached to the world. Third, meditation and self-inquiry. A seeker must experience the soul within. Just as a mirror, when cleaned of dust, reflects a clear image, when the mind becomes pure, the knowledge of the soul naturally reveals itself. Fourth, the company of the wise, satsang, being with the Guru. Just as sitting near fire warms the body, being in the company of the Guru awakens the light of the soul. It is only through the Guru's guidance that the bonds of ignorance are broken. Gurudev, does a self-realized person still perform actions in the world? My child, a self-realized person is not bound by any actions. He sees that all activities of the world occur according to the laws of nature, and he remains a mere witness. He is neither affected by happiness nor disturbed by sorrow. Some enlightened beings continue to engage in worldly duties for the welfare of others, like King Janaka, who ruled and spread dharma even after attaining self-knowledge. True renunciation is not about changing one's attire, but about the state of the mind. If someone lives in the world without attachment, he is free. And if someone renounces the world but remains attached within, he is not truly liberated. Gurudev, how can one practice abiding in the soul while living in the world? To remain established in the self while living in the world, three main practices are essential. Remembrance and contemplation, constantly reflecting on the nature of the self, understanding, I am not the body. I am pure consciousness. Just as the reflection of the sun in water is unaffected by the movement of the water, the soul remains untouched by the joys and sorrows of the world. Equanimity, samta, remaining equal in happiness and sorrow. For a self-realized person, there is neither friend nor foe. He sees all with the same vision because he knows that the same Brahm exists in everyone. Action without attachment. Performing actions without desiring their fruits. Understanding that everything happens by the will of the Supreme, and one is merely an instrument. Gurudev, if a self-realized being has no attraction to the world, does he also become devoid of love and compassion? No, my child. The love and compassion of a self-realized being are not limited, but infinite and universal. Ordinary people's love and compassion are confined to specific individuals, families, or groups. But for a self-realized being, the entire creation is like a family. His heart overflows with love, but it is free from attachment and selfishness. His compassion is like a cloud full of water, showering rain in all directions without discrimination. He loves, not for personal joy, but because he sees within himself the infinite source of love. A self-realized being is like a lighthouse for the world, guiding others selflessly. However, he has no pride in his actions. Just as the sun gives light without thinking that it is doing a favor, a self-realized being shares knowledge and compassion without considering himself the doer. Gurudev, if a self-realized being has no attraction to the world, does he neglect his duties toward family and society? No, my child. A self-realized being never neglects his duties. In fact, he performs them with greater ease and love. What once seemed difficult due to ego and attachment now feels like a play. He fulfills all relationships, but without a sense of ownership. He loves, but without attachment. He serves, but without the sense of I or mine. Gurudev, if the soul is beyond birth and death, then who experiences life and death? My child, life and death occur only at the level of the body and mind. The soul remains untouched by them. The one who identifies with the body experiences the cycle of birth and death, but the one who realizes the self goes beyond it. Just as the sky is not affected by the movement of clouds, the soul is unaffected by the birth and death of the body. Gurudev, if the soul is changeless and motionless, then how does it manifest in worldly activities? My child, the soul does nothing by itself. It is merely a witness. All activities in the world take place according to the laws of nature. The soul is like sunlight, which only illuminates but does not engage in action. Just as the reflection of the moon in water appears to move while the real moon remains still, the soul is untouched by worldly changes. Gurudev, after attaining this knowledge, what remains as the purpose of life? My child, after attaining self-realization, the only purpose of life is pure love, compassion, and the welfare of all beings. There is no personal desire left, only the experience of Brahm and its expression remain. Just as a lamp shines without expectation, an enlightened being radiates love and wisdom without selfishness. This is the completion of self-realization. Gurudev, if the soul cannot see itself, how can it be experienced? The soul cannot be seen, for the seer and the seen are one. But when the mind becomes completely still and focused, the soul reveals itself in its own light. True renunciation is of the mind. If one wears the robes of a renunciate, but remains attached within, he is not a true monk. And if one lives in the world, yet sees it as mere illusion, he is a true renunciate. In reality, renunciation is not of things, but of ignorance. Gurudev, after realizing this knowledge, does one's life change completely? Yes, my child. When this knowledge awakens, one sees himself separate from the body and mind. For him, joy and sorrow, gain and loss, birth and death become equal. He experiences completeness and remains blissful in all circumstances. Self-realization is always available everywhere and in every situation. Just as the sun always shines in the sky, even if clouds cover it, similarly, the soul is ever present. Self-knowledge is not attained externally, but within. When the mind becomes still and awareness develops, the light of the soul reveals itself. The Supreme Being, from whom all the Vedas, scriptures, life force, and elements derive their meaning, cannot be illuminated by anything else. It is self-illuminating, the embodiment of knowledge itself. Gurudev, does that mean no proof is needed to know the Supreme? No. Just as a lamp is not needed to illuminate the sun, the Supreme is itself the source of truth, knowledge, and bliss. All scriptures and teachings merely attempt to describe it, but the ultimate truth is only experienced when the restlessness of the mind ceases. But Gurudev, does a self-realized being have a specific appearance or behavior? No, such a being can appear in any form, sometimes as a saint, sometimes as a devotee, sometimes as a madman, and sometimes like a child. They may wear clothes or wander without them, but inwardly they are fully awakened because they have realized that this world is merely a play, and they are only a witness to it. Just as waves rise and fall on the ocean's surface while its depths remain undisturbed, similarly, a self-realized being may assume any external role, yet remains unwavering in their true nature. Like gold, which can take the shape of any ornament, but never loses its fundamental nature, a realized soul may take any form, but remains firmly established in the self. Such a person is not bound by external rules and customs. They eat when they wish, remain silent when they choose, and appear in any form they desire, sometimes as a saint, sometimes as an ordinary person. Their soul experiences complete freedom. They are joyful even in solitude, and have no fixed abode, yet they always remain steady in their true nature. They have no fear, no desires, for they have understood the play of existence. They act yet remain unattached, experience yet remain untouched. They are the truly liberated ones, who, transcending life and death, dwell forever in bliss and peace. Just as the sun radiates light equally for all, but remains free from expectation or attachment, a self-realized being lives in the world without being bound by any purpose. Gurudev, an ordinary person sees death as a major event. But what does it mean for a self-realized being? Just as dry leaves fall from a tree with the wind, the body of a realized being may end anywhere, yet it makes no difference to them. An ordinary person sees death as sorrowful, but for a realized being, it holds no significance because they have already transcended bodily identification. What meaning remains in the destruction of something they never considered their own? Just as a burning incense stick turns to ash, but its fragrance spreads into the air, similarly, the body of a self-realized being may perish, but their consciousness remains immortal. Whether a bird dies in the jungle or on the rooftop of a palace, does it affect the soul of the bird? Likewise, the destruction of the body does not affect the realized soul. Death belongs only to the body. The soul remains untouched. The scriptures clearly state that while the body is perishable, the soul is eternal and indestructible. Even after the body perishes, the existence of the soul remains. Just as a lamp's flame may go out, but its energy persists in another form, just as a broken musical instrument does not destroy music itself, music simply finds another instrument. Similarly, the soul continues beyond the dissolution of the body. Look at the relationship between the sky and the clouds. Clouds come and go, their shadows appear and disappear, but the sky remains vast and unchanged. Similarly, the soul remains pure, steadfast, and immortal despite the body's transformations. Gurudev, does that mean the soul can never cease to exist? No, all visible things in the world eventually perish. Stones, trees, food, clothes, all decay over time. But when this transience ends, the soul remains established in its divine essence. The body, senses, life force, and mind dissolve, merging into the boundless existence of Brahm. Gurudev, after attaining self-knowledge, how does the distinction between the individual and Brahm disappear? Just as lighting one lamp from another makes them indistinguishable, for they are both part of the same light. Similarly, after self-realization, the distinction between the individual and Brahm disappears. The person merges into pure truth, consciousness, and bliss, fully established in the Supreme. Gurudev, does an enlightened being have no personal identity? For the enlightened one, there remains no duality. He neither clings to a specific form nor is bound by any identity. He is pure consciousness, pure bliss, and pure existence, limitless, indivisible, and infinite. Gurudev, does the soul completely merge with Brahm? Just as a ray of the sun, upon merging back into the sun, loses its individual existence and becomes one with the source, similarly, when the soul merges into Brahm, it loses its separate identity and exists solely as pure Brahm. Water, in its natural state, remains pure and flowing. The sun remains radiant, and the sky remains unaffected by anything. In the same way, the soul transcends the cycle of birth, death, pleasure, pain, and karma. The very idea of liberation arises only due to ignorance. If, in the darkness, one mistakes a rope for a snake, fear and anxiety arise. But when light appears, one realizes it was just a rope all along. Similarly, when the light of self-knowledge dawns, one realizes that one was always free. Just as water evaporates into invisible vapor but remains fundamentally water, so too does the consciousness of the enlightened one dissolve into the infinite. Bondage and liberation exist only at the level of the mind. They do not affect the soul. When self-realization occurs, this illusion disappears, and one understands that one was never truly bound. True liberation is not about breaking free from bondage, but about realizing that bondage never existed in the first place. Ignorance is the veil that prevents the soul from perceiving its pure, eternal, and liberated nature. As long as this ignorance remains, bondage appears real. But the moment it is dispelled, one realizes that Brahm was always luminous and unobscured. To say that Brahm is ever covered by anything would contradict its completeness and supreme nature. If there was something capable of veiling Brahm, then Brahm would no longer be the highest reality. The scriptures do not acknowledge duality, and thus, the notion that Brahm could ever be covered is against the principles of Vedanta. Liberation is not a new state to be attained, it is eternally present. We fail to perceive it only due to ignorance. When the veil of ignorance is lifted, we realize that we were never bound, but always free. Bondage and liberation are mere concepts of the intellect, not of the soul. The soul neither undergoes bondage nor follows a process of liberation. It is eternally free, pure, and indestructible. Brahm remains ever pure, detached, and conscious, undergoing no change. In a dream, whatever one experiences seems real, but upon waking, one realizes it was merely an illusion. Similarly, the soul is always present, yet the intellect remains deluded about its true existence. Whatever is subject to change belongs to the realm of the mind, not the soul. The idea of bondage and liberation arises only due to Maya, illusion. In truth, they do not exist. The soul is ever free, pure, and immutable, just as the sky remains vast and unaffected by the passing clouds. Clouds may appear and disappear, casting temporary shadows, but the sky itself remains unchanged. Similarly, the soul remains unwavering despite the apparent changes of the body and mind. Like waves rising and falling in the ocean, yet leaving the ocean itself unchanged, the soul too remains ever liberated and still. The experience of bondage and liberation is caused by Maya, but the soul is beyond both. It is a mere illusion of the mind. In reality, there is neither creation nor destruction, neither bondage nor liberation, neither a seeker nor the liberated. All these are mere plays of illusion, appearing real due to ignorance. The truth is simple. The soul is eternally pure, immovable, and unchangeable. Just as various events occur in a dream but are later realized to be mere illusions, similarly, bondage and liberation are nothing but imagination. Like a movie screen where countless images appear and disappear, yet the screen itself remains unchanged. The soul too remains ever steady and free. The world appears to be full of bondage and liberation only due to Maya, but Brahm remains ever undivided, formless, and indivisible. One who realizes this truth understands that in reality, no one is bound, nor is anyone liberated. Everything has always been, and will always be, the one eternal truth, Brahm. In this world, we remain trapped in the cycle of pleasure and pain, just as a deer is deceived by the illusion of water in a mirage. This knowledge frees us from such delusions and guides us toward self-purification and liberation. Just as water quenches the thirst of the seeker, this spiritual wisdom leads the seeker toward the bliss of Brahm. O Gurudev, it is only by your grace that I have been able to understand this truth. I bow to you again and again. My child, now that you have attained this knowledge, live it. Renounce the ego and experience your true nature as existence consciousness bliss. This is the path to liberation. This message is not just for the disciple, but for all of us. What you have heard is not just words, it is the very proclamation of truth. If these words have stirred something within you, if even for a moment you have glimpsed your true self, then know that this was not just another video, it was a mirror reflecting your own consciousness. But the journey does not end here. This channel is not just about providing information. It is about leading you to your own self. We will continue to bring to you the divine words of the great scriptures and the nectar-like wisdom of enlightened beings. Wherever there is a glimpse of truth, we will go there and take you along with us. If this video has touched your inner being, share it with your loved ones. Like, share, and subscribe to this channel so that this divine wisdom never stops flowing and continues to illuminate all seekers. Your journey has just begun. The journey to bring yourself back to yourself.